The president has pulled and is pulling the US out of the Paris Accord. He's also working to change regulation on things like climate. Why embrace this now? Cynics would suggest that it's because polling suggests all voters, including GOP voters and Trump supporters, really do care about climate change.
It's great to be with you this morning. And, we're talking about planting 1 trillion trees, not just in the United States, but across the globe. And if you look at what can we do that's proactive and pragmatic as far as making our environment better and being good stewards of what we have, there's really nothing better out there than planting trees. Trees are the natural carbon catching device. They store the carbon in the wood, release oxygen back into the atmosphere, and there's a lot of research behind this. There was a paper that came out of Switzerland that said if we were to plant 1 trillion trees across the globe, do that by 2050, that we could sequester 205 gigatons of carbon, which is 2/3 of the man-released carbon since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So it's a serious proposal, and I think it has a lot of merits, and I'm glad to see that the president endorsed this not only at Davos, but he mentioned it in the State of the Union address.
Congressman, good morning. The European Union says it's going to be carbon neutral by 2050. When do we see a similar objective laid out by the United States?
Well, the United States is actually doing a better job at reducing atmospheric carbon than anybody else in the world. The data shows that we've reduced more carbon than the next 12 countries combined. So this is something that it's not new that we're tackling the problem of atmospheric carbon, but trees can be a critical part of that equation. And if you think about all the talk that's out there on reducing the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere, what do you do with the 411 parts per million of carbon of dioxide that's already in the atmosphere? And there's nothing better than a tree using natural photosynthesis to take that carbon out, clean the air, and store it in wood. And the Trillion Trees Act does more than just plant trees. It's aimed at making our existing forests more healthy so we can store more carbon on our existing forest land, plus using that wood in sustainable buildings.
But Congressman, the European Union has a target. It is going to be net carbon neutral by 2050, and that is encouraging an awful lot of companies and an awful lot of consumers in Europe to make the decision that they need to do their bit as well. It is becoming an industrial priority in Europe. Do you think that there is a danger that the US gets left behind, maybe not left behind, but is behind Europe in this challenge?
Not at all. And right now the United States is ahead of Europe. We don't have to set some kind of goals like the Europeans are doing. We're actually inventing the technology. We're doing the practical, proactive things to reduce the amount of carbon emissions. And again, what do you do about the carbon that's already in the atmosphere? Forests are the key to pulling that carbon out of the atmosphere. It's the largest scale, most economical tool that we have available to clean the air that's there. At the same time, we need to be investing in research and development. The Trillion Trees Act not only pulls carbon out of the air, but it also has components of it that would reduce the amount of carbon going into the air, because we're talking about sustainable buildings.
There's no doubt that, in 100 years' time, it will be a very nice thing to have had 1 trillion trees planted over that time. But realistically, emissions need to get reduced now. Aside from that, where are you going to get the budget and the land to plant these trillion trees?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Part of this program allows corporations and nonprofits, NGOs, to partner with the National Forest Foundation, and we're getting amazing outpouring of support of people who want to join in to help fund planting these trees. And another thing you've got to remember is trees were regenerating, reproducing long before we learned how to put seeds in a nursery and replant the seedlings. We can do forest management practices that will cause natural regeneration through just this existing seed source that would far outweigh anything that we can plant. So it's a catchy title, the Trillion Tree Act, but there's more ways to get to 1 trillion trees than just going out and planting them. Although, like Ethiopia planted 350 million trees in one day.